Hello again, my name is Estefania, and one more time having a chat with Ana Maria. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fine, great, and happy to bring this second part of this series of interviews from your home here in Colombia to the audience wherever they are watching us today from.
Welcome to this session.
Wonderful, and today we will continue to talk about purpose, and this time we will be discussing what purpose is not. We have already discussed what purpose is, the elements and the stages in our first video, and now we are going to switch it around for a bit and talk about what purpose is not. So,
right.
Ana Maria, why is it important to also define purpose from what it is not?
Yeah, I think it's really important because we have a default way of being, which is not being purposeful.
Yes.
And so I'd like to bring this character that represents our reactive nature, which is our default. You know, when we're children, that's how we go through life. We're reacting to what life presents. And it's all about pain and pleasure. It's all about punishment and reward. And it's all very primal in a way, reactive. So our default, we're wired to react. And especially in times like right now, where there's a lot of difficulties, global challenges that puts many of us in a state of triggering and fear and whatnot, and that enhances and that increases our reactivity. So I think it's important to know that purpose is not that default way of being.
Yes, and I am really caught up by that way of phrasing it, the default way of being, right? Because then that means that we're all, in a way, having these default settings.
Yes.
So can you please dive deeper into what this default way of being means?
Yes, and I love that you use the actual metaphor, the settings. What are those settings that are our default settings? It's our conditioning, right? So we grow up with conditioning from our family, from our culture, from the media, from our education system that has us behave and pay attention to certain things and completely disregard certain things. And I'll give you an example in my life. When I went to school, all the emphasis was placed on outside, on everything that you could measure, see, understand rationally. No emphasis at all to the inner world of humans. And so I was conditioned to always pay attention to performing, and it was very individualistic education, so being the best and even competing with others.
Yes, and I would like to talk a little bit more about these conditionings, and something you mentioned, that is the educational system that perhaps most of us, and you and I and people watching, went through a similar educational system purely based in the rational aspect of humans. So this conditioning can also make that people are not aware that they are conditioned. Is this possible?
Absolutely, because as we shared in the earlier video, many people go through life at the stage of no purpose inside of the conditioning, and you can have a life that is content and that is even satisfying at some level with completely giving into the conditioning. So I'm not judging that. I'm just saying that there's a point where you start to question, some people start to question the conditioning, and that's an opportunity to go beyond that default way of being.
All right, so we have stated now that purpose is not living a life based on the default way of being. That's the first one.
Yeah.
Great. So what else is not purpose?
Purpose is not a beautiful sentence that you wrote one day at a workshop.
Yes, and that connects to our first video, because actually writing the phrase and declaring the purpose is part of the purpose discovery journey. Yet, by itself, what you're saying right now, it's not having a purpose.
Exactly, because you might have written the sentence, but you don't actually live it, and you don't feel that inner force that drives you and that helps you navigate difficult circumstances. So you really have to feel it, feel that force. The sentence that you wrote definitely helps because it starts to point towards something, but that's not it either. And we can see that there's many people who have written purpose statements, but they don't embody it. And so here we want to bring in this idea of coherence, of embodiment and not only at individual level, but also on an organizational level.
Yes.
Organizations that have a beautiful sentence, purpose statement, vision, mission statements, everything all beautifully documented. But you go and meet people and you go and work there and they don't really embody it. That there's a big disconnect. And so that's not truly what we're talking about here in what is purpose.
Okay, and now you have introduced the corporate world or the organizational world when we are discussing having this declared purpose. And that just makes me think, and because we are also having this content shared on LinkedIn, which is a platform where everything goes around profession and your professional life, would you say that a profession is a purpose?
I would say that a profession can be a way that you express your purpose, but it's not actually your purpose. So you ask some people, what is your purpose? And they say, oh, well, I'm a doctor. And that's supposed to mean that they have a purpose, and not necessarily. Because there's a point in which you might not understand why you're doing this profession, what you chose it, but what is the bigger picture of what role you're playing and how you're contributing. And sometimes people have crisis because they chose their profession and then they don't do the inner work of understanding how is it meaningful, how does it nourish that inner sense of direction, motivation, and connection, and it becomes hollow. And then plus professions can become overly specialized, and so you become a super focused on one thing and you lose the bigger picture.
Yes, so purpose is something that goes across all aspects of people's life. So not only the profession, right? So maybe people who change professions and feel in a way guilty or feel that they have reached a point in their lives of crisis because they discover that their profession doesn't fulfill them. Would you say that this is just going through one of the stages that we discussed in the previous video?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that professions can have a lifetime, a specific lifespan, and when you feel that that specific role doesn't have any more meaning in life to you, it doesn't give you the same spark, it might be time to shift roles. And there's absolutely complete permission for that. And people sometimes don't feel the permission to let go of a previous identity in favor of something that is more life-giving.
That's very inspiring, Ana Maria. And there's a phrase that you mention often in our conversations that I think it's very worth bringing into this conversation. And it's that purpose is not a low-hanging fruit, or that purpose it's just not going to fall down from heaven, just like in whichever point in time. And I really like this metaphor. What do you mean by that?
Yes. And you're a great example because you are somebody who has been doing the groundwork of what it takes to live a life of purpose. Because there's so much conditioning, we do have to start to see the conditioning, let go, and then start to truly know ourselves in a variety of ways, and do a number of other practices and ways of going from the reactive way of living to a more intentional way of living. And I wanted to bring this Buddha, not that we need to be enlightened to have a purpose, but
or be Buddhist, or be
exactly.
Zen.
No, we don't have to be Buddhist.
Yes.
But we do have something inside that is more intentional, that is more mindful, let's say. And I brought this to represent this wise part of us. And so when I say purpose doesn't fall from the sky, it's because you do need to cultivate the ways of being that are not reactive and that are more intentional, more mindful, and get to know yourself in many aspects, because as you said beautifully, it's not just your profession. Purpose is about your whole life and how you find different roles for you to express all your talents or your gifts in a way that feels whole and purposeful. So that groundwork is something that I think is best done through a program in a community and a very serious curriculum. But at least, what we will be presenting to you in this summit, Purpose Sages, is the invitation of what this really entails.
Wonderful. Is there something else that you would like to add to what purpose is not?
Well, I think that we need to come to terms with the expectations of our family, our society, and our friends even these days.
Yes.
And it's to know that even if that seems like the obvious choice for your life, purpose is not necessarily the lowest hanging fruit.
Yes.
And it might put you a bit out of your comfort zone to pursue it. Like the example of Catalina earlier, she had to actually defy her family's expectations to live her true purpose. And that's uncomfortable. That's not the easiest thing. And I would say that purpose is not a one-time destination. Purpose is actually a series of milestones and a series of actually initiations, is what I would say.
Yes.
That take us through those 4 steps that we watched in our earlier conversation. And so we might definitely hit an important milestone like declaring our purpose, and that's beautiful, and we need to celebrate every aspect of this beautiful journey. But as we saw, it never ends.
Yes, it's always evolving, and that brings me back to purpose not being a statement on the wall, precisely because it's not, as you say, a one-time destination, and it's always an evolution. So perhaps you write a phrase today and then you leave it on the wall for months or for years, and that might not be your purpose anymore because you are constantly evolving, right?
Yes, because we're constantly evolving, and because we fall back to our reactive side. So even if we have this beautiful aspiration written on the wall, we have to constantly attune to what we said we are going to be and what we're going to do. And in that way, we need to constantly evolve to become.
Great. So to wrap up this video and to send a final invitation for people to join us at the summit, how is this experience going to provide a platform for people to go from that reactive state of being and what purpose is not to the purposeful way of living?
Yeah, so stay tuned to our 3rd video where we're going to talk about that path. And that path is something that we need to understand and really get a sense in our heads. And for that, we're going to create we're creating an event called Purpose Sages, where we share with you many dimensions of this path.
Yes. So we will be discussing this path in the next video. People will finally tune into what sages mean, who are the sages, why are we calling them sages. So go ahead and watch the first video if you haven't to find out what purpose is. And thank you for watching until the end of this one video. We hope to see you also in January 2024 for the Purpose Sages. Thank you, Ana Maria.
Thank you. Thank you, Nia. Thank you, everyone who's watching.
Thank you. Bye-bye.